The first official North Carolina practice of the season is in the books. What exactly is it that goes on in a first practice, and how does that help prepare you for the season? Coach Rob is going to help us break that down today.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Thursday, September 28th, 2023. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and joining me as he does every week is our guy, Coach Bill Robinson. Coach Rob, it's so great to be together. By the way, if you're watching, Coach Rob sent me some Milligan swag, so I'm rocking a Milligan University Buffs shirt today. Thanks so much, Coach Rob. If you're watching, he's also rocking his UNC basketball camp staff polo. So we are both representing the day. You love to see it. We want to thank you for making Locked On Tar Heels your first listener watch to get your team every day. Hey, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Want to tell you about our Discord, a great new opportunity for you to dive in with other people in the Locked On Tar Heels community. It's kind of like Slack, if you know what that is, lots of different channels, and you can hang out, have more in-depth conversation. In fact, later on in the show, time allowing, we're going to have some ACC schedule observations from a couple folks in the Discord, so stay tuned for that. In addition to that, coming up on the show today, you know that we got story time with Coach Rob. We're also going to look at a test that Coach Davis has been giving the guys and how that's going to set them up for the year, unpack some of that. But before we get to all those things, Coach Rob, where we want to dive in on right out of the gate is looking at the first day of practice. Obviously, that took place on Monday. Coach Pack and I just talked a little bit about it at the end of Wednesday's show. Just like to get different insights from all you coaches. And I do need to be very specific. I just said first day of practice. Let me rephrase, first official day of practice, because obviously the Tar Heels have been able to be together. The NCAA allows various practices throughout the summer and leading up. But Monday was that first day where it is in season. It's go time, all leading up to not late night anymore, live action, and then all exhibition and everything else in the season. So, Coach, everyone is all riled up and excited because it's on, it's going now. We're about 5.5 weeks away from the first game on November 6th. So I just want to ask you, from your viewpoint as a coach, what are the things that you're looking to achieve in that first practice? How do you set a foundation to build off of throughout the rest of the season?
Yeah, this is actually our first day practice right here. I got my practice plan.
Love it.
And can go off of that. But you want high energy. You want to set the tone for the year. You want the guys to know what your priorities are. What are the high priorities? Because if you're covering it first day, it's probably pretty important. So we want to talk about ball screen defense. Every possession's a ball screen now. So if we're not talking ball screen defense from day one, then we're going to get behind. We talk defensive transition. We have to stop the ball in transition. So that's a big thing. Those are two things we do right away. We also want to set the tone pace-wise. So if we're going to be a running team, we want to do a lot of transition drills, and we want to get up and down, and we want to do that in an organized manner. We're not just running around. So we start working on some of our fast break drills. One-on-one is such a big thing. You've got to be able to guard the ball. So we do a one-on-one drill every day. We're going to set the tone with what our favorite one-on-one drills. And then you've got to finish possessions. If you can't finish possessions, you're not going to be a very good defensive team. So we go through our rebounding drills starting from day one. And I like it's called rebound game. We want a toughness drill. That really shows how tough we can be. And if you're going to rebound, you got to be tough. And so those are the type of things we at least want to get started with, and then maybe even put our first favorite sets in.
Man, that's and it's crazy because I think folks think like, man, we got all this time till our first game. But if I remember correctly, your first game is November 8th. Is that right?
That's our first home game. November 4th, we're on the road. It's an exhibition, but our first regular season, November 8th. Yeah.
And so, I mean,
we're right into it.
Yeah. That's a Thursday, you said?
It's a conference game too. That's part of the problem with us. We play 24 conference games. So we get started right away. And if we're not ready to play that first game, it can affect conference standings come February.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that is not that's like a month and a half from now, 6 weeks away. And so folks, it is not some finite number that these coaches have to work these things in. You got to hit the ground running. And so that makes a lot of sense. Now, Coach, I love you giving us a little snapshot of the practice flow there. Is that something you keep kind of like you have a, proprietary view on, or is that something you would mind sharing and we could post out on the show Twitter or something?
Oh, I'd be glad to. And I have my practice plans from 1995. And it's hilarious. It's hilarious to look back and see how bad of a coach I was, at 25 years old. And hopefully 10 years from now, I'll look back to what I'm doing now and think, man, we didn't do anything then. So you're always constantly trying to grow and get better. I'll share anything I want. And we do a quote of the day and the thought of the day. And our first day is the exact same that Coach Williams had when he was. And it's amazing how much can be accomplished when nobody cares who gets the credit. Old John Wooden quote. But you're even from the first day, you're trying to set the tone of being unselfish, about not worrying about your individual goals. But if we win as a team, individual goals will happen.
I love that. Absolutely. Well, yeah, Coach, that'd be awesome. And then we can share it out because I'm sure people would love to see what that looks like. That's really neat. So you talk about that unselfishness. And I think that's the next question I want to ask you is specifically for like, there's obviously things you're wanting to achieve, sets you want to put in as you're talking about, drills we want to go ahead and run. What is it like just from a personnel standpoint? What are you hoping to see your players start doing on day one? What are you watching for out of them?
We're looking for guys who can make great decisions. Okay. So everybody learned how to score. Everybody needed to score wherever they were before they got here. They're probably a scorer. So what can they do to make good decisions, make great decisions? Everybody can get a shot off. Is it the right shot? Is it a good shot? Is it a bad shot? We talked about one-on-one defense, but then have they learned how to help, recover, talk about defensive rotations, things like that. And you find out early on the guys who have been, and it sounds bad, coached well before or not coached or not really caught on the concepts before. So it's early on. We want to teach all those things and then not just teach them, but drill them. So we're going to talk about 5 different ways we defend a ball screen. We're not going to put all 5 of them in at one time. Guys, it's just too overwhelming. But we slowly throw some of that stuff at them, and then we'll start pretty slow, but then we'll throw them in the fire quickly and see how they do in live action.
Yeah, well, so let's follow up, like, for example, on shot selection. Mm-hmm. How do you go about communicating those expectations? Because as you said, some guys are going to get those concepts and principles already of, hey, we're not just looking for a shot or a good shot. We're looking for the single best shot we can get on every possession. We have to value every possession, so critically important. How do you go about communicating those expectations and saying, nope, that wasn't it. 2 more passes would have gotten us this shot or something of that nature?
It's funny you use those exact words because that's one of the things I say a lot. Nope, not it. And it could be a live. And if it's dead, I'll go over and talk about it. But we'll run sets and actually say, here's option 1, here's option 2, here's option 3. So this is the right shot. We want to try to get this one first. If not, then this, and then if it breaks down from there, we just got to make a play late. But the guys will understand if they're shooting a contested shot, it's probably not the right shot. We can get a better shot. And usually early threes, unless they're wide open in transition from our best shooters, they're probably not great shots either. But we don't want to see contested shots, especially early in a shot clock.
And how I love that too, because I think that's another thing people wonder about with coaches is how open and honest are you with the guys about, hey, look, the numbers don't lie. This dude his 3-point percentage is so much better than yours. Get him the ball more. Like, do guys understand and accept those roles of like, hey, I'm a good shooter. He's a great shooter. How open are you about that?
We try to make those lines very clear early on in the year. An easy way to do that is, okay, get on the baseline. We're going to shoot free throws. All right, you guys pick who you want to shoot the free throws, because if they miss, we're going to run. And they establish right away who they think's the better shooter. We know that these 2 or 3 guys are going to get picked every single time in that situation. We had a kid hit 3 shots in a row during live action yesterday, and the next guy, the next possession has to go to him. I don't care we're going to have to create a shot for him, and it didn't happen. And those are the type of things we can step in and coach. But again, it's getting the right spots, getting the shots we want, getting the ball to the right person at the right time. And that's why second week of practice that we're in right now is so difficult, because it's still, you're trying to get through the same concepts.
Over and over and over. Well, as for the Carolina context, Coach Davis is out here giving tests to the guys that they have to pass in order to come be at practice. What is that all about? And what does that tell us for the Tar Heels this year? Coach Rob and I are going to unpack that here in just a second. But first, I need to tell you that this episode of Locked On Tar Heels is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. The app, it's super easy to use. You can bet on all sorts of stuff like spreads, player props, how many times the Dolphins are going to score 70 this year, overs, unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Folks, want to also remind you that coming up tomorrow, Friday, is Locked On College Football Kickoff Live from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On College's YouTube page. Make sure you check it out to get ready for this weekend of college football. Locked On College Football Kickoff Live tomorrow, Friday, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern. So, Coach, in his recap of the first day of practice, Adam Lucas, who, folks, if you don't follow his writing, is so phenomenal in just capturing the heart of what Carolina is all about. But he wrote about the first day of practice, and one of the things he discussed in that write-up was a test that Coach Davis is making all the guys take. Don't ace it, you can't practice. As simple as that. So the test was 5 core principles for the program, and then 4 key offensive principles for this year, 4 key defensive principles for this year. We're going to kind of blow past the 5 core principles for the program because they're a little more general in nature, but I really want us, Coach, to dive in on those 4 key offensive and defensive principles. So the core principles: be hardworking, tough, competitive, disciplined, and unselfish. I think that kind of, those, it's like, yeah, of course you want to do those things, right? That's a good general principle for any program. The one that sticks out to me the most is unselfish, which is a word that you used earlier. Coach, any of those words, which of them stick out most to you, and why would they be important?
The competitive thing is always one for me, because we want to be competitive in every drill we do. So if we have a one-on-one drill, we're going to be competitive with it. We're going to have a winner and a loser. If we have a rebounding drill, it's going to be a winner and loser. So that's always something. And it's funny to see who wants to compete in something that doesn't mean anything. There's nobody there watching. The scoreboard's not on, but who still wants to win no matter what. We've got a freshman right now. He doesn't want to lose at anything. I mean, if we played any type of game, we could be, playing a video game. He's going to want to win everything because that's just the way he's wired. The unselfishness, that what takes your team from good to great. It's being able to make the extra pass. It's being able to trust the guy to have your back if you get beat. It's all those little things that you have to do. And Carolina's got some guys who are really good at that. And I was really impressed with Harrison Ingram, with his unselfishness this summer. Really impressed with Paxton Wojcik and his ability just to be able to do all the little things that just don't get seen. And I think both those guys are going to be key. I think Harrison's going to start, obviously. I think Paxton off the bench. But those are little things that you see, that unselfishness, that just take that team to the next level.
Well, and as we'll see as we dive into these offensive principles, which is a great segue, that was an area where Carolina, I think we could call it, was bereft last year. They were sorely missing that unselfishness that leads to those great shots we were just talking about a little bit ago. So that said, Coach, let's move into those. The 4 key offensive principles that Coach Davis has laid out are: number 1, be a running team; number 2, attack and dominate the offensive glass; 3, be unselfish with passes and screens; and 4, dominate points in the paint. And Coach, I don't think it's a stretch to say that the majority of these, the Tar Heels did not accomplish last year. That's not a negative or bad thing to say. It's just literally looking at the stats of how games played out last year. So, let's start with be a running team. So, for example, last year in KenPom adjusted tempo, Carolina was 99th in the country. And basically, folks, we're looking at possessions per 40 minutes and adjusted for your opponent. And so Carolina 99th last year. Let me give you the 9 other years that have been the last decade leading up to this year. Going back to 2013-14. Carolina was 18th, 16th, 60th, 40th, 46th, 6th, 67th, 43rd, and then in Coach Davis's first year, 39th. So last year was pretty typical of where Carolina had been, or excuse me, 2 years ago was pretty typical of how Carolina had been in the Roy Williams era. But last year, that was the lowest the Tar Heels had been since before Coach Williams, when they were like 106th, I think it was, in Coach Doherty's last year. So, Coach, how does this team adjust to that? How do they get to being a running team?
It's a mentality. You have to be, this is something that's got to be drilled every day, every possession. It's also something that has to be drilled. It has to be something they talk about on a daily basis. But I think in order for them to get to play as fast as they want, I think defense has to change a little bit too. And I'm not saying they got to be pressing and trapping, but I think getting out in the passing lanes, trying to create some turnovers, maybe doubling some ball screens, just doing some little things. If they're not going to get the extra turnovers, it's going to be hard to run. And you can run off rebounds, obviously, and Armando is really good at not just grabbing the rebounds, but getting long outlets. But you've got to get those wings to sprint the floor to be able to create space for those handlers to be able to either drive it or pitch it ahead. And that's what I'd like to see more, that rebound outlet pitch, get it, go get it, and get it up the floor. And then you put pressure with somebody like Cormac Ryan, because if he gets an open look, he's going to let it fly. And not only making those shots, but even when he misses, that's hard to defensive rebound. So you got Armando grabbing a rebound, spreading the floor. Now you're trying to box him out on a long rebound. That's the type of pace I think I would want to see them do.
Yeah. And that seems achievable. It's just like you said, got to get that mindset in and going. Let's move to the second one. Attack and dominate the offensive glass. This one is even more glaring to me in how different it's been in the past 2 years under Coach Davis. In the prior decade, in the final 8 years of Coach Williams, Carolina was never worse than 16th and never lower in offensive rebound percentage than 35%. The last 2 years, 59th nationally, which was 31.9%. And then last year, 119th nationally, 30.4%. And so, Coach, a lot of that obviously is it's just not something that Coach Davis has prioritized as much. Some of that is who are the 5 guys on the floor. When you're not going 2 bigs, the offensive rebounds aren't going to be there as much. But so help me figure out here, because if we're going to have a different lineup style and personnel on the floor, you just aren't going to be able to attack and dominate the offensive glass as much. So how do you bridge those two things and balance them?
Yeah, I had a really interesting conversation with Joe Holiday years ago. And we were talking about Syracuse. We're talking about the zone. How do you attack the zone? And he said they had a 3-pass rule against Syracuse. On the 3rd pass, they had to shoot it. And it wasn't so much about shot selection, but they knew that if they waited, the longer they waited to get a shot, the harder it was to get offensive rebounds. And it wasn't so much as getting the perfect shot. It was, hey, we're going to attack it in a way where we're going to get an offensive rebound if we don't make it. So I think there's some philosophy there too. If you're waiting till late shot clock every time, if it's under 10 seconds, everybody's ready to rebound. And if they attack quicker, I think it allows more offensive rebounds. The 3-point shot has changed it. Now those long rebounds, it's not go hit your man box out and go get it. It's who's the quickest one to it. So I think that's part of it too. I think if you have guys that are a little bit more quicker to the ball, and you have Cormac taking those threes, and you've got Harrison Ingram and RJ chasing them down. RJ is a great offensive rebounder because he just wants it more than everybody else. So I think that's a big part of it, is they just have these guys that just have to have that desire to go get the basketball.
Well, the third point in Coach's offensive keys is be unselfish with passes and screens. Coach, they were under 50% in assist percentage last year, 45.4%, in fact, 310th in the nation. The last time they were under 50%, I gave up looking at the 98-99 season, because they hadn't been under 50. In fact, there were multiple seasons above 60% assist percentage, which is one of my favorite stats to track every season. And then the fourth key offensive principle is dominate points in the paint. Anything from you highlights on either of those points?
Screening is not something that you like to do. Most guys don't want to screen. So when he's talking about being unselfish with the pass, we all kind of know what that means. But being unselfish with a screen is totally different. But what we're and I've heard them say this. I mean, screener's always open. So if you're having a hard time getting the ball, and be a great screener. Um, it's amazing how many great screeners are also great scorers because they're the guys that get better looks after they set a screen. John Stockton was a great screen setter because he did a lot of little on big type stuff, and they couldn't switch it and they get the ball to Carl Maloney to score in there.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a big part of it. But dominating the paint, I think Armando's got to touch the ball 75%. Possessions. He's got at least. I'm not saying he's got to shoot it that much, but he's got to be able to touch the basketball, play through him, and allow him to make decisions. He's a better passer than most people think, and he can create shots for other people. But we still just the best percentage shots are those inside shots, and I think we just got to get him the ball as much as possible.
Okay, let's switch to the defense. 4 key defensive principles, and Coach, I'll just give all 4 of them to you, and I want to ask you which of these stands out the most to you. Number 1, be great guarding the ball. Man, that's that man-on-man defense you were talking about earlier. You got to be great at it. It's so difficult to do, especially with all the offensive freedom. Number 2, box out and be the top team in the country in defensive rebound percentage. Number 3, talk. Talk. And trust and be good communicators. I think we heard a lot last year. I remember Jeremy Roach, after Duke beat Carolina, talking about how he knew Carolina wouldn't be able to defend him on that last possession because they weren't a good talking team. Yikes. And then number 4, protect the paint. What out of those 4 key defensive principles really stands out to you?
The first one's always the most important to me is just guarding the basketball. Doesn't matter if you're playing man, zone, press, trap, whatever you're doing, you got to stay in front of the guy with the basketball. If you can stay in front, then nobody needs to help. Then there's no rotations. So that's always the key. That's why we play so much one-on-one. We'll only do it for 3-4 weeks of the season where we play, but we're doing it every single day. We'll do it different ways, but we're trying to make sure that our guys understand how important it is for them to stay in front of the basketball. The communication part is tough because you got huge arenas that are loud. So we talk about how you communicate verbally, obviously, but we'll communicate visually where you're pointing, and then we also we communicate physically where you literally push or shove somebody where they need to go. So there's a lot of different ways to communicate, but when it's loud and you can't hear things and there's a lot of different stuff going on, you've got to be able to understand where you're supposed to be and when.
And that can't be fit. That has to be achieved in practice. You can't figure that out on the fly. And that's why all that drilling, all of that work is so important to do now so that you don't have to do it as much on the court. But I think it sounds like Carolina, you were talking about Paxton Wojcik and Harrison Ingram and them being good talkers. It sounds like Cormac Ryan is going to be a great talker and communicator as well. So we look for those. So Coach, I'm really curious. I'm going to be tracking these through the season. I want to kind of keep tabs on them and we'll revisit them from time to time. Is Carolina doing what Coach Davis wanted them to do in these 8 offensive and defensive principles? That'll be super interesting to keep tabs on. Well, friends, that's enough X's and O's for today. Let's get to story time because I know you're looking forward to it with our favorite storyteller, Coach Rob. We'll hit that in just a second. All right, folks, we are joined by Coach Bill Robinson today, the head coach of the Milligan University Buffaloes, 2 decades on staff at the Carolina Summer Basketball Camp, and he's working on a book, all sorts of great Carolina stories, and each week he shares one with us. Coach, what is today's story?
Today's story is about Hugh Donahue, and Huey is he's one of the greatest characters when it comes to Carolina basketball camp. But Huey's first year at camp, he was 8 years old. His dad, Big Hugh, played for Dean Smith, and this was 50 years ago. Huey's almost 60 now. But he was too young to be in camp. First night, got ran over. Dean Smith saw it, went to Hugh and said, Hugh, you can't have Huey in camp. And he says, well, I'm not taking him home because I gave his mom a break. So we're going to have to figure out something. So his first year at camp, Dean Smith, when he drove from gym to gym, would take Huey with him. So as an 8-year-old, he was spending the whole day with Dean Smith just driving around. So he played JV for Coach Williams when Coach Williams was a graduate assistant. So he's part of the family. Well, his first year at camp as a coach, camp coach, he was the defensive coach. And he couldn't get his guys, anybody, to take charges. Now, these are 11-year-old kids. And he was mad that he couldn't get anybody to take a charge. So he was trying to think, what way could I get them to motivate them to take a charge? Well, it was the last morning of camp. And the coach's party had been the night before, and maybe he wasn't thinking so clearly on this next morning, but he had, they were using the old city buses at the time, which were a little bit higher, and he had measured to see exactly how high they were. And he planned to take a charge on the bus, not literally in the bus, but as the bus rolled in, he was going to stand in front and take a charge on the bus. And he figured out he had about 6 or 8 inches of clearance. So he paid the bus driver $20 to come in exactly at 3 miles an hour. The kids were all lined up to go get on the bus. Being the last day, the parents were all lined up. And as the bus rolled up, Huey yelled something about defense and stood in front of the bus and put his hands together and yelled and took a charge on the bus. And as he hit the floor, he could hear everybody kind of gasp. And then he heard a couple parents yell. And as the bus rolled completely over him, he hit his head on the ground and kind of got a little bit of a cut. And all of a sudden he realized what he had done. And now he didn't know what to do. And as he turned to look, Phil Ford was there because Phil was an assistant coach. And Phil looked at him and said, "Run, Huey, run." So he ends up running back to his dorm. He didn't know what to do. He locked himself in the bathroom, and he hears a knock at the door, and it's Bill Guthridge. And Huey, you need to get out of here. And he just ignored him and just pretended he wasn't there. He said, "Well, I'll be back in 3 minutes with the key to the bathroom." Well, in that time, Dean Smith showed up, and he knocked at the door. Well, Huey couldn't ignore Coach Smith. So he comes out, and Coach Smith asks him what happened. He explains the thing. He says, "Well, in all my years, this is maybe one of the greatest pranks I've ever heard. I'm going to have to let you go for the rest of this week, but I look forward to having you back at camp on Monday." So it's one of those unbelievable stories. I assume it's true because I know Huey, and I can't believe he would make this up. But it's probably the craziest story that we have in the book.
My goodness. And it stinks that it's not this day and age because it would have been captured and all over social media. And
absolutely. It definitely would have been. But
oh my goodness.
We have a whole chapter about Huey stories. And that's the craziest one. Can you imagine?
That's unbelievable. But at the same time, so completely believable. Those I would love to hear stories of the young folks that were watching that day. And I think they learned a thing or two about playing a little unselfish defense. Maybe Coach Davis could insert that as they're having these 4 key principles and get run over by a bus. That is brilliant and beautiful. Thanks for sharing it, Coach.
Sure.
Well, man. Well, folks, too late on getting in. Apologies to the folks from the Discord, but we're going to add in on tomorrow's show. I promise you, we will talk about getting your comments in on your reactions to the schedule. And so apologies for that today. I feel like, is it Jimmy Kimmel that's always like, "Sorry, Ben Affleck or Matt Damon, you can't get in today." I feel like that's what I've done to these guys today. My apologies. Coach, great stuff as always. Thanks so much. Best of luck to the Buffs as the season's really getting underway. Can't wait to keep tabs on that. Folks, you can follow the show on Twitter at LockedOnHeels. You can follow us on Twitter at Coach Rob Buffs and me at Isaac Shade. If you want to have more in-depth conversation, email the show, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. Maybe you have a question for Coach Rob that you want to submit. Do it. We can get it to him and would love to unpack that. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on video and audio format. Smash the like button to let us know you were here. We want to thank you, especially you everydayers who are here with us all the time, man. We feel the love, and it's so great. We want to thank you for being here. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be back with you tomorrow to wrap up the week. But until then, peace.